Welcome back to the David Kurten Show. This is today's News Talk TNT. I'm delighted to have with me on the show now in this section Jana Lunden, who is the leader and founder of the Natural Women's Council in the Republic of Ireland. Jana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me this morning.
No, really good to have you on the show. Now, well, you're doing some really important work there in the Republic of Ireland, and I guess it's going to spread out wider than that with your organization because you're just talking about really common sense things that affect us all, not just women. But tell us a bit more about the Natural Women's Council, and why and how did you start it?
Yeah, so the Natural Women's Council, we're a group, a small grassroots not-for-profit organization made up of really about 25 women sort of in our kind of our private core working group, but then we have thousands across the country who support the work we do. How was it started? It was back in July 2022, and we were campaigning at that time still, I think, against some of those draconian COVID measures that were affecting the children in Ireland with all the lockdowns, school closures, and masks. And I was outside on a sunny day hanging out the laundry, and I got a call from someone we work closely with in the Lawyers for Justice Ireland to say, did you realize they're trying to erase the word woman from the Constitution under Article 10, 11, and 12 of the Maternity Protection Acts? And I thought, erasing women maternity acts, that doesn't make sense. So we decided to do what we thought was going to be a small gathering outside our government buildings, Leinster House in Dublin, to really celebrate women. It wasn't a protest. It was, this is celebrating women. We won't be erased. We aren't going away. And on that day, we actually launched the idea of a women's council on 7/7/2022. And luckily, the government reversed that ludicrous decision to erase women from the Maternity Protection Acts to cater to transgender men who breastfeed. But fast forward just a couple of months ago, they ran a referendum in Ireland, once again trying to erase the word woman, mother, and home from our constitution. And luckily, the public at this point completely woke up to these tactics and the overall agenda, and really did, you know, even people who didn't know the details of the referendum, because we got 100,000 leaflets out to campaign on the referendum. We had thousands of conversations. Even people who didn't know the details of the referendum said, anything the government is pushing, I'm going to silently protest at the ballot box and say no. And it was a landslide no, 75%. So I don't think the government was prepared for they're not used to having such a large group of people dislike them. And I think it was a real eye opener for the government, who wasn't reading the room, to say the people of Ireland have had enough of the government's failed policies, which are coming from unelected, unaccountable, untaxed global entities like the United Nations, WHO, and WEF. The people have had enough, and things are really heating up over here.
Well, I was so happy to hear about the results of that referendum because we talked about that, covered that. It was last month, wasn't it? It was no and no. And I really
Yeah.
genuinely think that the people in the government thought that they were going to win. They had no idea that,
Yeah.
they're pushing this, what I would call cultural Marxist
Yes.
ideology or
Yes.
progressive ideology. But the people that just want to be left alone and just, don't want
Just
things to change,
Just let
and
us live. Don't erase women. Don't erase mothers. Don't erase home. Protect our children.
Mm,
People really want to be left alone. And it came out after the referendum, some documents that were produced. If you follow Grift Media, the government had information ahead of the referendum on the impacts, particularly on immigration. Direction and advice from the Attorney General. They had it ahead of the referendum, refused to publish it under Freedom of Information Act request until after the
mm.
referendum. So the government used 20 million euros of our public funds for this nonsensical referendum, whilst hiding documents, spreading misinformation. Even the director of the National Women's Council of Ireland, which get 1 million a year in our public funding to advocate for women, they were spreading blatant information. The media was spreading misinformation, but luckily the people were much wiser than the government thought.
Absolutely. Wise, that's a very good word because you're just sticking to traditional values that we've always had. And then there's all these people come along and they say, we need to change that. It just doesn't make any sense. But, that's good. But these people don't stop, do they? They lose and then they pull back for a little bit and then they come back
Yeah.
with something else. So, I mean, you made a video, I think just recently on X. It was like about what's happening in Ireland this month in April 2024. So
Yeah.
what is happening and what are you thinking about at the moment?
Yeah, what is happening? I think it would be easier to answer what isn't happening, but there's a few things that are all coming at us at once. And the most immediate thing, I won't say the most urgent because there's so many issues, but the most immediate thing is the EU migration pact, which is coming at us, and they want to push this through without any debate. We've had a few independents, such as Michael McDowell, who's very well respected, and Sharon Keoghan speaking out against this. TD Carol Nolan, a handful have been speaking out against the dangers of this EU migration pact. So we're encouraging everyone to write to their TD, visit their TD, call their TD, pile on to the TDs to say, we do not, as the people of Ireland, we do not opt into this EU migration pact. Ireland is already at tipping point with our reckless open borders. We have 13,000 Irish homeless, 4,000 are children. We have hospital wait lists that are years long. We have a couple hundred children waiting for spinal surgery. I mean, it's not that the Irish people aren't kind and welcoming, but we have to look after our own people of Ireland before we can flood the borders with thousands more. And
Mm,
particularly the ones coming in, thousands have been, even though they're telling us they're Ukrainian women, when you walk through the villages and towns, these are single unvetted men. They are not Ukrainian. They are not women, no matter how they're identifying. And people in the villages and towns are terrified. But when they protest and speak up and say, we don't want these thousands of men to be put in our town, we don't have the amenities, it's not safe. They are labeled with absolute, the government shouting visceral labels at the people like myself, being called
mm,
the labels that are, past their sell by date, the far right, the
mm,
bigots, the transphobics. Now it's extremists. So you can tell the government is panicking and they've lost the room when they double down and try to label the people and discredit people more. That's a sign that the truth is coming out. Gender
mm,
ideology is making its way into every aspect of our society, including schools. But luckily, the Cass report was impeccable timing against
mm.
that. So people can see that teaching boys they can be girls and girls they can be boys in the school curriculum, and the primary school draft submission is open until June 7th, but parents, once again, have not been invited to that consultation. It's very much hidden. So we're doing a campaign on that. But that will be teaching primary school children, age 5, that they can be a boy, girl, neither or both, when clearly the Cass report shows the dangers of transitioning children, even socially transitioning, leads them to those irreversible, dangerous puberty blockers. So parents need to wake up and just say, no, we're not asking for this.
Well, you've already got movements in place,
Yes.
particularly in Wales with public child protection Wales, and
Mm-hmm.
they're quite established. So it's really good that you're doing something in the Republic of Ireland to fight what's
Yes.
going on there, because I mean this is a horror. And as I said to our previous guest from Northern Ireland, we talked about a similar thing because it's been pushed there as well. Kids should just be left alone. They shouldn't be exposed to adult
Exactly.
sexualities, adult ideologies, which are, crazy for most
So true.
adults. They're fringe for
It,
adults. It certainly shouldn't be for
it,
kids.
it should not be for kids. And some of the content we've seen, we did a library book campaign that we launched last January 2023, whereby we launched a very peaceful campaign. We developed a letter that was written for us by our Lawyers for Justice Ireland to encourage people to go into the library, look through the children's section, and any books that weren't appropriate, peacefully serve the library staff with a notice of liability, a public notice of liability. Now, of
Mm,
course, the media and the government twisted it to say the far right thugs are threatening library
mm,
staff. These are the same people burning down immigration centers. I mean, they really went for us and they just tried to destroy many of us. But we went out and said, let's talk about the content of the books. We are not against the LGBT community in any way. The trans movement is actually anti-gay, teaching people they're in the wrong body, regardless of how they feel or what sex they're attracted to. So we are not against our gay community, despite what the media twisted. And we went out with that content and it shocked people. And we just did a recent film production that everyone should be looking forward to called Story Time for the Irish Mammy. And we're doing an 8-part series, about 2 minutes each, that's going to go all through social media in the next week. Whereby we're going to be reading some library books and school curriculum books that parents can see what their children are being taught. So that's going to be a real shocker to keep your eyes on.
I've seen some things like that from the USA where they have open school board meetings. It's a
Yes.
different kind of culture. You don't have them here, but I've seen some of the things where parents read out from books which are in the school libraries, and they get told to be quiet by the very
Yeah,
school boards that have like
that's true.
allowed those books and bought them to go into the library, which
Yeah,
is really
it's lunacy. I was on a recent radio show last year with Philip Boucher Hayes, Joe Duffy's sidekick, and they were defending these books and implying that women and mothers like me were trying to take Ireland back to the dark ages and we're prudes. And I said, well, let me just read you something from that book. No, 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 this is daytime radio. I said, no, I'm going to read it because it's in the age 12 library section. And he had to give the viewers a warning, and I read it. And let's just say it wasn't my most proud book reading, but it got the message across when I read those words from that book.
Well, I mean, it's really good that you did. And I think, we're at the point where people maybe they need to be shocked by actually hearing what is in some of these things. And if adults can be
Yes.
shocked, then clearly this is not correct to give these things to children,
Yeah, no.
even children as young as 4 and 5. But it's all coming in lockstep with different countries. We're all the countries around the world, and the States and the USA, the countries in the
Mhm.
EU, all seem to be implementing this at the same time. So this is something that's coming from above, isn't it? It's something that's coming from.
Absolutely. People always ask me, where is this coming from? I don't remember when politicians knocked on my door asking for votes, telling me this was going to happen. So people need to realize that everything that's happened in the last few years that doesn't feel right, it's all connected. It's all being driven by the United Nations, the WHO, and the WEF. And in 2019, the United Nations and WEF joined together. They're really one and the same. That happened in, I think, summer of 2019, coincidentally, 6 months before the COVID era. And the WHO, any document, every one of your listeners should look up. It's public document. The WHO Standards of Sexuality in Europe. That's a very long document, but in the document is a matrix. And that matrix, anytime somebody says that this isn't coming into children's schools, I say, look at this document. It talks about things like teaching age 4 masturbation in the schools, teaching age 9 about their first sexual experience. So this is really a really damning document that everybody should look at, and shows everybody who the WHO and United Nations really is. But what I will tell people is, what's happening in the foreground should concern us. You said, what's happening in Ireland? The EU migration pact. We're already at tipping point. We cannot flood our borders. Ireland has the right to opt out, like Denmark. So EU migration pact. There's the hate speech bill. Minister Helen McEntee wants to push through. This is her pet project she's been trying to push through for the last year without success, which will silence people and criminalize us for our thoughts, not our actions. Our homes can be raided by Garda. They can ask for our devices and passwords and criminalize us based on something that wasn't even done. The sexualization of children. But what we need to look at is not what's in the foreground, but what's more concerning is what's in the background. So everything happening is terrible and it's chaotic, and it's very important that it will affect our lives forever. But what's happening in the background is even worse. And we have to say, are they purposely distracting us by what we're seeing to hide what we're not seeing? And what we're not seeing right now is something called, it's not made it into any mainstream papers, is the WHO treaty and international health regulations. This is a treaty that will take over the nation state's sovereignty, every aspect of life on planet Earth. It includes things like agriculture. Think of our independent farmers. So our food sovereignty. It includes climate in there, LGBT, the education, our health freedom. So whatever anyone's view is on what health choices they make, their views are irrelevant. What is irrelevant is we should have the freedom to make those choices. So this treaty is due to be ratified the week of May 27th. And the health minister, Stephen Donnelly, is flying over to try to sign Ireland's sovereignty away. The optimism is that countries are waking up to this. And if you look at the news in Louisiana in the US, they voted unanimously 37-0 against this WHO treaty.
Excellent.
So people need to really say this is really the most important thing happening behind the scenes, is what they're not telling us is this WHO treaty. So we did an event in Ireland on the 6th of February. We flew in some world experts on this issue, and also some fantastic MEPs like Christine Anderson and Andrew Bridgen, and some doctors, Kat Lindley, Tess Laurie, Meryl Nass, as well as a lawyer, Philip Cruz. They all flew to Ireland to meet with all of our parliamentarians here to say, this is why you should not sign the treaty. So we went into the Dáil, and that meeting happened. And then we did a public meeting across the road at a hotel. Of the hundreds of parliamentarians in Ireland that were invited, guess how many attended to hear about this important information on our sovereignty and freedom?
Well, I'd imagine about two.
You're exactly right. There were two. You must have seen my tweet.
So no, I haven't, but that's about the number that would attend in the UK. I mean, they're so pathetic, the MPs.
That just shows the contempt.
They're all in parties that are supporting this. They're in parties that are supporting the globalist agenda, Agenda 2030, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the WHO Pandemic Preparedness Treaty is all part of this. I know that there are some countries in Africa who are very much against it. Isn't it crazy that our hope for freedom in the world lies with countries in the global south, in Africa, in South America, and so on? We hope that they are going to vote in large enough numbers to overturn.
That's true. And in Ireland, it's really like the Irish government clearly has a serious contempt for particularly all of the people here. They're not listening to the people. These are policies driven from the top down, whereas the government should be implementing policies from the bottom up, from the people who pay their wages, but it's coming from the top down. And the government have contempt for the Irish people, but particularly for the working class of Ireland. The government has really vilified the working class, common, decent people like myself, who are out on the street talking to people, leafleting, doing live events. Those people have absolutely been vilified by the government, and they're trying to silence them. But that is a sign that we're winning. And in fact, Leo Varadkar, who just stepped down as a party leader there, our former Taoiseach and Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar flew over to New York last September for a big summit, big global WEF United Nations summit. Now, not many people knew that Ireland co-chaired that summit. So Ireland is in the cockpit, the belly of the beast. But it was very optimistic. I have the article here. Leo Varadkar quoted that only...
I know we would like to talk about Leo Varadkar. Well, actually, probably wouldn't want to talk about Leo Varadkar too much, but coming to the end of the show, and you've spoken about all of these things, which I know everyone is very, very concerned about. But we have to defeat this WHO pandemic treaty. That's one of the most